did you indicate whether or not there was a light on the porch of the residence of 875 South Bundy?
There was, in the ceiling above the door.
In the ceiling above the door?
Yes.
And how much light did that provide of the area where Nicole Brown was found?
I'd say indirectly, very little.
And why's that?
The bodies were down below the stairwell, and due to distance and the placement of the light, it just the lighting was indirect, and it just didn't do much to illuminate the bodies.
You want to make this next photograph remark People's Exhibit number 86?
86.
Two, please.
All right, do you recognize what's depicted in this photograph, sir?
Yes.
To the left side of the photograph, you see an area that has a gate, an arched gate.
Yes.
What's that? Whose residence is that?
That's the Taylor residence adjoining the 875 Bundy location, just adjoined to and south of.
Is that the other half of the duplex?
Yes.
And to the right-hand side, is that 875 South Bundy, Nicole Brown's residence?
Yes.
There's a light that seems to be shining in between two of those trees.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the source of that is?
Actually, I believe there would be two lights, one to the condo to the left and one to the condo to the right.
And is one of those the lights you've just described between the two condominiums?
Yes.
Was the front of the residence as well lit as you see it in this photograph when you arrived at 4:30 a.m.?
That's my recollection, yes.
Mm-hmm. What about the area between Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman? Sir, with all the lighting that you've described, the area between the bodies of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown, can you tell us what was the lighting like in that area?
There's really nothing to illuminate that area.
Then can you tell us, sir, how visible were the hat and the glove underneath that plant in that dark area? Objection, Your Honor. Can we approach?
I'll sustain the objection to the manner in which how visible was the hat. You might want to ask some more foundational questions.
Okay. Can you tell us, sir, first of all, when you first arrived at the scene at 4:30 a.m. And you went to look at you observed from the top landing, did you not?
Yes.
That was the first time you saw that crime scene.
Yes.
Can you describe for us what the lighting was like in the area between the bodies of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown?
I would describe it as very poor.
And what do you mean by that?
There was no direct lighting on that particular area.
Were you able to see, with your naked eye, without the assistance of a flashlight, were you able to see the glove and the cap that were under the plant?
I believe I was able to discern that there might be an object there, but not enough to clearly tell what it was.
And at the time that you were looking down there, were you looking specifically for those items?
They were being pointed out to me, yes.
And as they were being pointed out to you, was there somebody training a flashlight on the area at the time?
I had a flashlight.
And were you training it on the area at the time as that they were being pointed out to you?
Yes.
And even so, it was hard for you to see them?
Not once I illuminated.
That was leading suggested.
You've already so testified. I'm just going back into that, have him describe it further.
Or we'll proceed.
With the aid of the flashlight, I could tell what they were, yes.
All right, during this time that you're examining the crime scene, taking measurements, directing the photographer, the criminalist, the print people, are there other officers at the scene, sir?
Yes.
What are they doing?
I had other detectives do what we call a canvass of the neighborhood.
What does that mean?
One of the duties of those officers was to go door to door to see if there might be any witnesses to what occurred, to observe any illegally or vehicles on the street that appeared to be parked erratically. I also had these officers do a canvass of the rear alley, which included going through trash cans at the Bundy location, as well as the neighbor's location, as well as a dumpster that was in the alley.
And what were they looking for? What did you tell them to look for?
In the alleyway?
Yes, and the garbage cans?
Anything that would appear to contain what might be blood, a weapon, clothing, any what might appear to be blood stains or blood smears or transfers on any item at all.
All right, now at some point, sir, did you leave that scene?
Yes.
And where did you go?
As far as leaving the scene itself,
Yes.
yes, I went to Parker Center.
Was that in response to a phone call that you got?
Yes.
From who?
My partner, Detective Van Adder.
And about what time was that?
Approximately 12:15 p.m.
When you left, sir, what did you do to make sure that the scene was going to be taken care of?
Simpson, that was the idiot. You have to follow that question.
Overruled.
I spoke to Mr. Fung, the criminalist, explained to him that I was leaving and that the officers at the scene would maintain a perimeter security until he was completed with his investigation. I did the same with the print people who were still at the location, and I spoke with the officers upon leaving, logged out, and left the location.
Then were all of the experts that had to arrive to conduct the crime scene investigation already at work in progress by the time you left the scene?
Yes.
And had you given them all instructions as to what you wanted done?
Yes.
Now, at some point, sir, did you return to the Rockingham location later that day?
Yes.
When was that?
I believe it was approximately 5:15 p.m.
And when you did so, sir, did you enter the defendant's residence?
Yes.
Why was that?
It was pursuant to a search warrant.
Did you recover something from the location yourself?
Yes.
What was that?
A pair of Reebok tennis shoes, or athletic shoes.
And where was that? Where did you recover them from?
In the walk-in closet off of the master bedroom on the second level.
And can you tell us why you picked those particular shoes to take from the closet?
Yes.
Why?
I was in the company of Mr. Simpson, and I asked Mr. Simpson if he recalled the shoes that he was wearing the night before. He pointed to the Reeboks and stated I might have had those on, something to that effect.
And
So at that time, I told Mr. Simpson that I wished to take those shoes, and he stated, fine, you can take those or any other shoes.
so you took those?
Yes.
What'd you do with them?
I put them in a box and put the box into the trunk of my police vehicle.
And then what did you do?
I secured or left that location shortly thereafter.
And then what?
I went in to watch.
Watch.
End of watch. I was complete, through for the day.
Okay. So where did you go?
I went home.
What about the shoes
The shoes were in the trunk.
of your car?
Yes.
So you didn't take them into property?
No.
Why not?
The property unit that was handling our evidence, the evidence control unit, was closed. The criminalist had been collecting items of evidence all day. I would have needed a DR, Division of Records number, to book the item. I would have needed an item number, none of which had been obtained yet. It wouldn't have been possible to book those shoes that night.
And so what did you do?
I maintained the shoes in the trunk of my vehicle until the next morning when I took them to the Scientific Investigation Division Serology Lab.
And what time in the morning did you take them there?
I believe I arrived at approximately 7:30 a.m. I don't recall for sure.
Did you take them directly to the ECU, Evidence Control Unit?
No, I took them to the serology lab.
Directly to the serology lab?
Yes,
Who did you give them to?
to Greg Matheson.
Is he a serologist there?
Yes.
Now, if you know, sir, can you tell us when was the crime scene at Bundy broken down?
I believe approximately 3:30 p.m., but I'd have to check the log to make sure.
Would it refresh your memory if you did so?
Yes.
Showing you a copy of the crime scene log, sir. Could you please examine that, see if it does refresh your recollection?
The problem with that is, if I could be further, he's referring to somebody else's law, you know that record is not exactly.
No, overruled. Any item can be used to refresh recollection, doesn't have to be prepared by that individual.
But he wasn't there.
If he knows.
Does that refresh your recollection, sir?
Yes.
What time was the crime scene taken down? At 875 South Bundy.
3:45 p.m.
On June the 13th?
Yes.
How is it determined when a crime scene should be broken down, sir?
Be determined by the investigating officer or any other technicians that were working at the scene, whether or not they'd completed all that they felt that they could do at that particular time.
Now, at some point in every case you've ever worked, does there come a time when you have to collect the evidence and close down the scene?
Yes.
Take the tape away?
Yes.
And that occurred at 3:45 in this particular case?
Yes.
The problem is,
Your Honor, may we approach, I think these speaking
Yes.
objections are very inappropriate.
don't worry about that, maybe we
Yes, approach, both of you, with the court reporter. All right, thank you, counsel. Continue.
Yeah, Your Honor?
Certainly.
Now, while you were present at 875 South Bundy, sir, did you ever see Claudine Ratcliffe or the driver go west on the walkway leading back to the rear alley?
No.
Where in the front of the crime scene did you see them, did you see them move around?
The initial approach was from the yard area just to the south of the walkway. I observed them on the stoop above the scene, and I observed them in the vicinity of both the victims.
And other than that, did you ever see them? You did not see them in the walkway leading back to the rear alley. Did you see them in the rear driveway?
No, the closest I saw them to that would be inside the residence.
Did you ever see either one of them go in or out of the garage door?
No.
May I have a moment? Oh, lastly, sir, were you present when the photographs containing the numbered tags were being taken by the photographer?
I was in the area.
And the numbered tags that we saw in some of these photographs, do you know who placed those items?
Placed the tag?
Placed the tags, yeah.
Yes, that would be the criminalist, Mr. Fung.
And the tags that he was placing on evidence, was that evidence that you directed him to have, to specifically direct his attention to?
Yes.
You indicated that he arrived before the coroner left
Yes,
and before the bodies were removed.
that's correct.
What did he do before the bodies were actually removed from the location, if anything?
Nothing.
Had he just arrived at that point?
Yes.
And was he wearing gloves, sir?
I don't recall.
Was he wearing booties?
I don't believe so. but I don't recall.
You don't remember?
No.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Mr. Cochran.
How late are we going to go today? I don't think I can finish it today.
Well, do your best.
Do my best.
Now, what's your preference, counsel? I mean, we have about 12 minutes remaining in the court day.
About 12 minutes?
There are some, Mr. Sheck, are there still some DNA matters we need to resolve? Your choice, Mr. Cochran.
Thank you, so. Please not to go today, Your Honor, so
I'm just telling Mr. Cochran I don't want to hear his mouth this afternoon, and so,
Because of that, I'd like to ask a few questions, if I might, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Detective Lange.
Got them.
You have been a homicide detective for more than 20 years, is that correct?
It's approximately 20 years.
And as a homicide detective, you've had some great experience in investigating homicides as such, is that correct?
Yes.
And in the course of your career as a Los Angeles police officer detective, you have investigated, I believe you said, some 250 to 300 homicides, right?
Either directly or indirectly, yes.
And you know that when you come on the scene of a homicide, as a detective, one of the things that you want to know is you want to try to solve the particular crime or crimes, isn't that correct?
Certainly.
And you know that you're not an island unto yourself. You have a team of people who work with you, isn't that correct?
In most cases, some cases, it hasn't been that way.
In this case, you had a team of people that would ultimately be at your disposal, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And in that team, you would have your partner, Detective Van Adder, is that correct?
Correct.
You utilized the services of Detectives Furman and Phillips while they were still there, is that correct?
Correct.
You've told us about the use of criminalists, is that correct?
Yes.
And the criminalist you talked about was a criminalist by the name of Dennis Fung, is that correct?
Yes.
There was also another, a female criminalist who came out there by the name of Mazzola, isn't that correct?
Yes.
M-A-Z-Z-O-L-A?
I believe there's two L's, but yes.
And Mazzola, in fact, was the officer in charge as between she and Fung on that particular day, isn't that correct?
That's not my understanding.
Did you see any reports which indicated that she was, in fact, the officer in charge?
I have heard of a report that probably incorrectly states that she was. It's my understanding she was a trainee.
In fact, she was a trainee, wasn't she?
I believe so, yes.
And this was only her third crime scene, isn't that correct?
I don't know.
You don't know that? All right. So you have these criminalists, then you had some print people, fingerprint people, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you had them do fingerprints throughout, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Did you have anybody come out and check for footprints? Do you have any footprint specialists there?
No other than the criminalist who I requested to do a stride analysis and photograph the prints. Other than that, no.
Did you ever ask anyone to go over into this loose dirt area that you've described for us and attempt to see whether or not you could match up any shoe prints or footprints in that loose dirt area?
I myself checked that area and couldn't observe any.
But you couldn't observe any?
No.
Did you have anybody else come out and try to do that?
I did not recall specifically telling Fung to do that. He may have, I don't know.
You don't know if he did it or not?
No.
You knew, of course, that Mr. Goldman had been in that area, is that correct?
Yes.
You knew, of course, that his assailant or assailants had perhaps been in that area, isn't that correct?
I believe that to be the case.
You knew because you saw a picture of Detective Furman that he had been in that area. His footprints were in there, is that right?
Yes.
Objection. Counsel's testifying to be no facts. Assumes facts, not.
Well, that's
Was
a
the
speaking objection, Your Honor. That's a speaking objection, Your Honor.
At this point, the objection is sustained, but it's just a foundational
Well,
question.
sure. You've seen that photograph of Detective Furman pointing down toward the foliage with his foot in that loose dirt, didn't you?
Yes.
So you know he was in there also, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And we know at some point, did Miss Ratcliffe go over in that area?
Yes, she did.
Did she go over there with her assistant to move Mr. Goldman's body at some point?
Yes.
So there have been a number of people who have been walking in this loose dirt area, isn't that correct?
Over a period of time, yes.
Yes. Prior to the bodies being moved, right?
Yes.
Now, sir, as an experienced homicide detective, one of the things that you would want to know and try to determine would be the time of death of these victims. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And so that we're clear, and the jury's clear, the L.A. County Coroner's Office is a separate county entity, separate and distinct from the Los Angeles Police Department. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And the Coroner's Office, they have their own training. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
They have investigators and they have doctors, don't they?
Yes.
And you rely upon them in the course of your homicide investigations. Isn't that correct?
Certainly.
And over the course of your 20 years, whenever you've had a body in Los Angeles City, you've had to call the coroner and you've had to work hand in glove with the coroner. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
It's probably a good play on words, hand in glove, right?
Yes.
And you've worked together and you rely upon each other. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Now, in that connection, you know that the coroner's office, when they get to the scene, they do things like take a liver temperature. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And what other things that are you aware of that the coroner's office will do in an effort to determine or extrapolate backwards and determine the cause of death, the time of death?
In an effort to generally determine time of death, I'm aware of several things they would do. They would test for rigor mortis. They would test perhaps for lividity, of course the liver temperature. They would interview the investigator at the scene.
Anything else you can think of now? They oftentimes check the eye fluids.
I'm aware of that examination, but I'm also aware that the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office does not conduct those examinations in the field.
But you are aware of the eye fluids.
Yes.
Check. All right, now you mentioned rigor mortis. And in the time the coroner is there and these bodies were moved, what time was that? Where was the body of Nicole Brown Simpson moved?
Approximately 10:30, 10:40 right in that time.
A.M.
A.M.
on June 13th, right?
Yes,
And at that time, was she in full rigor mortis?
she was.
And by that, what do you mean by full rigor mortis?
By full rigor mortis, it means that the muscles in the body have become rigid due to a coagulation of protein in the blood.
All right. And with regard to lividity, what can you tell us about lividity with regard to her body, if anything, at that time?
Her body had no lividity.
All right. And what was the ambient temperature at or about the time of 10:30 a.m.? What was the temperature outside there at the time the coroners arrived?
I believe it was 70 degrees.
And you said that the coroners took her body into the coroner's vehicle and took a liver temperature, right?
Yes,
And what was the liver temperature obtained at that time?
I believe the liver temperature was 82 degrees.
Now, these things that the coroner's office did at 10:30 a.m., approximately 10 and a half hours after the first officer arrived at the scene, in your experience, it would have been better had they been able to do those things much earlier and after these bodies were found. Isn't that correct?
Not necessarily.
Well, in a perfect homicide investigation, which I'm sure you strive for, wouldn't you want to have the coroner out there as soon as possible to render that kind of assistance, to check the liver temperature, to check the lividity, to check the state of rigor mortis as early as possible? Wouldn't you want that?
Yes,
All right, that would be ideal, would it not? If you could do that.
that would be ideal. We
All right.
don't often see that.
All right. Now, with regard to, and I'll be mindful of the hour, Your Honor. With regard to this area, this loose dirt area you've been talking about, and maybe you can see that photograph, Jonathan. What's that?
This is People's Exhibit 83, Your Honor. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. Laser code.
Now, with regard to People's Exhibit 83, a couple of questions. This area, so that we're clear, how wide is this particular area? Did you take some measurements?
Sustain. Why don't you rephrase the question?
Certainly. What is the width of this area where Mr. Goldman's body was located, sir? The width?
From south to north, in the direction that we're looking, it's 5 feet 8 inches.
All right, so it's less than 6 feet from south to north. And from the tree, looking west to east, how wide is it?
I have that on the schematic. I believe it's something like 4 feet 2 inches. That's
So,
right.
something like 5 foot 8 inches by 4 foot 2 inches, is that correct?
That's correct.
And you ascertained, did you not, that Mr. Goldman was at least 5 foot 10 inches tall?
Yes.
And he weighed how much?
I believe it's approximately 170, 175 pounds.
And that loose dirt area over there indicates to you there had been some movement, some violent movement of the earth to cause that, as far as you could tell. Isn't that correct?
I don't know. That's something I surmised.
Well, I know you weren't at the scene, right? But
Right.
you have surmised a number of things. And one of the things you surmised was that that dirt was moved in the course of the altercation. Isn't that correct?
I have no way of knowing that, but it did appear to be freshly moved, yes.
Freshly moved dirt, isn't that right?
It appeared to be that way.
All right. And you also described, when Ms. Clark was asking you questions, that Mr. Goldman may have had some keys in his hands at the time that he was being confronted by assailants or assailants. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you know, do you not, that if a person has keys in their hands, that is one of the ways that you could inflict a wound on the person who is attacking you. Isn't that correct?
I suppose that's possible.
In addition to that, at some point, Mr. Goldman also apparently had a ring on his finger. Is that correct?
I believe so.
And so this area that we now know is less than 6 feet and about 4 feet also had a tree, as depicted there in People's 83, kind of right in the middle of it. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you have described for us earlier that Mr. Goldman, in the course of this altercation, sustained some defensive wounds. Is that correct? In his hands?
Appeared to be that way, yes.
Had some cuts on his hands?
Yes.
And you know, and it's your opinion, that he put up a vigorous fight. Isn't that correct?
It was apparent he did put up a fight, yes.
All right. In this very small area. Isn't that correct?
I believe so, yes.
It's 4:30. We'll resume tomorrow. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take our recess for the afternoon. Please remember all my admonitions to you. Don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. Don't form any opinions about the case. Do not allow anybody to communicate with you regarding the case. Do not conduct any deliberations till the matter has been submitted to you. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. All right, have a pleasant evening. Detective Lange, you may step down. You're ordered to return tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Thank you.